Dear colleagues, welcome to the global webinar on strengthening climate change and disaster-related statistics, needs, priorities, and actions for Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, which is being held on 10th and 11th of May for 3 hours a day on the Zoom online platform. My name is Ekaterina Polishchuk. I'm a statistician from the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, and will be the moderator for this webinar. Before we officially start, let me share a few housekeeping items with you. The webinar is being held online with English, Spanish, French interpretation. To select your preferred language, please click the interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen. Please display your first and last name on Zoom. Please mute your microphone and turn off your camera if you are not speaking. To do this, you will find two corresponding icons at the bottom left of the screen. If you have a question or comment, please write in the chat and the session chair will return to it. Or raise an electronic hand during the question and answer session. To do this, click reaction at the bottom of the screen and then click raise hand. If the speakers don't have time to answer your question during the webinar, they will contact you in written. When you speak, please use headphones and a microphone for the best sound and don't speak too fast for the best interpretation quality. I also would like to add for speakers, when it's your turn to speak, you need to turn off the interpretation first before you speak. Otherwise, you will not be heard properly. Thank you for your cooperation. This webinar was organized by the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, ESCAP, and the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, in collaboration with the Economic Commission for Africa, the Economic Commission for Europe, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, the Economic and Social Commission for West Asia, and the Economic Nations Statistics Division. For an official welcome and opening statement on behalf of the United Nations Environment Programme, let me invite Brennan Van Dyke, Chief of the Capacity Development and Innovation Branch of the Early Warning and Assessment Division. Please, Brennan.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you all. I'd first like to express appreciation for your interest in this webinar. At UNEP, we believe strongly in the use of sound science as a basis for environmental decision-making and action. And we are so pleased with the excellent cooperation between UNEP and ESCAP to build the capacity to use statistical information effectively. Addressing climate change trends has been identified by UNEP as one of 3 priority thematic areas for action, as highlighted in our UNEP Medium-Term Strategy 2022 to 2025. UNEP supports countries in gathering climate data and developing strategies and solutions that are compatible with the latest scientific information and that promotes sustainable consumption and production to achieve the largest impacts possible in terms of mitigating climate change and increasing resilience. In collaboration with its networks and partners, including the Secretariat of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Green Climate Fund, and the Global Environment Facility, UNEP helps countries meet their transparency and other reporting obligations, as well as assists countries in assessing and better reporting on their climate-related national capabilities and circumstances. Together with the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific and other partners under the 14th tranche of the UN Development Account Project on Data and Statistics, we are grateful for the opportunity to host this webinar on strengthening climate change and disaster-related statistics, the needs and priorities and action for countries in Asia and the Pacific, Europe, and North Africa during the next 2 days. Although this webinar is dedicated to statistics, it includes information about policy aspects to enhance dialogue between statisticians and policymakers at country, regional, and global levels. We believe this webinar will help national experts improve their knowledge of climate change and of disaster-related statistics, and their ability to use this knowledge to support decision makers through high-quality, comparable, climate-related statistics. I wish all of you, speakers and participants, fruitful work and interesting discussions over the coming days. Thank you so much. Katja, I turn the microphone back over to you.
Thank you, Brennan, a lot. And for official welcome and opening statement on behalf of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, allow me to invite Rachel Bowen, Director of the Statistics Division. Rachel, please.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I say good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and bonjour, buenos dias. It's my pleasure to be able to welcome you as well to this webinar. So as we said, I'm Rachel Bowen. I'm Director of ESCAP Statistics Division. And I'm really pleased that you're able to, all of you, to join us for this webinar on strengthening climate change and disaster-related statistics. And we were really pleased to be part of this event, co-organising it between ourselves, UN Environmental Programme, but in collaboration with the other regional commissions at UN Statistics Division. And I think we all know, don't we, that climate change is not just a theory, it really is a reality that's affecting our planet in a multitude of ways, from rising sea levels to extreme weather events, but also we're seeing that impact, I think, on all of our lives, almost on a daily basis. So we know that climate change and disaster-related statistics are two really incredibly important, cross-cutting, multifaceted areas of statistics, and they have that potential as well to help guide the development, implementation and monitoring of policies to address some of the most pressing challenges that our world is facing today. But despite that, there are also
recording stopped.
There are also areas of statistics where actually most countries, particularly most vulnerable
Recording
ones,
in progress.
Adequate official statistics in this area, and there's still a lot more work that needs to really be done to support their production, dissemination and use, and that's why we're of course here today and tomorrow. So recognising this as well, back in 2014, ESCAP first established an expert group on disaster-related statistics for Asia and the Pacific. And then its establishment actually followed a series of policy discussions that happened, which really highlighted the need for better data and statistics to strengthen that evidence base for all aspects of disaster risk reduction and management. And then more recently, the 8th session of the ESCAP's Committee on Statistics in August last year, at that meeting, we decided to support statistical officers in their efforts to meet the growing demand for climate change-related statistics, really through the identification of regional priorities needs in this area of statistics. And so therefore, we're really happy to be working with UN Environmental Programme and other UN partners to help to strengthen national capacities and really to look at what we can do to increase the availability and policy use of statistics and indicators relating to climate change and disaster. And as we've heard already, this work is actually part of that broader project that we have, working on resilient and agile national statistical systems to meet post-COVID-19 data needs to recover better. So I think you'll hear some more about that later on as well. But through this event, we're really hoping that we get to hear more about that need for quality official statistics on climate change and disasters, and also how to support the monitoring of global commitments and international development agendas, so including the Paris Agreement, the Sendai Framework, and of course the SDGs themselves. But we'll also hear about the many relevant international statistical frameworks and guidelines that have been developed by the international statistical community over the last decade. But then perhaps most importantly of all, there'll be an opportunity to hear from countries and to hear from all of you about your priorities, also your experiences. And towards the end of the event, we'll also be looking at the various ongoing global initiatives and looking at how we can move forward together to better respond to the increasing demand for statistics relating to climate change and disaster. So I know that it's, as ever, a very packed agenda. I'm really sorry I can't stay for the full event either, so I apologise for that in advance, but I have to go to another meeting. But I just wish you every success, and it's my pleasure to be able to welcome you onto this webinar. And please, as we go through this as well, don't forget use the chat bar. Please do ask questions. Please do interact as much as possible. Lots of names on the screens, but there really is a great opportunity to interact with each other. So I wish you every success. Thank you.
Many thanks, Rachel, for your very warm words, and we wish you good parallel meetings. And now let's move on with our agenda. In order to better understand the statistics and data project that is hosting this webinar, let me invite Gabriel Gomez, coordinator of this project. Gabriel is an interregional advisor for the organization and development of National Statistical System at the United Nations Statistics Division of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, based in New York. Gabriel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Katya. Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all of you, participants and colleagues. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to represent actually UNSD, but not only. I'm also the coordinator of this project, and I will tell you a few words more about what are the objectives of this project and how we are going to work together. I just wanted to start saying that from the COVID pandemic, which is of course not it was a disaster, but it was not an environmental disaster, but it was a pandemic. We have learned a lot. We have learned, number one, that it has been difficult for us during these hard times to produce the statistics that we have produced, that we have to produce regularly for different reasons. Of course, again, it's not a natural disaster, but we learned that we could not, for example, collect the data as we used to collect them. But the second thing, and this is maybe not so much the purpose of this event, was are we prepared also with our staff, with our infrastructure, with our communication means to continue to work together and produce a minimum set of statistics, not all related to the COVID, but some that were necessary to develop our recovery policies. The second important aspect or lesson learned from the COVID-19, and I repeat, it was a disaster, it was a sanitary disaster, but it was one, was that we were also not flexible enough to react to emerging demands, to measure the impact of the COVID, and eventually to design recovery policy. And I think this is one of the topics, an important one of this event that we're having today. Now about now it works. About the project that I'm going to tell you a few words. I mean, the trigger is actually a call of the 75th session of the General Assembly that asked us, or the call was to leverage SDG mechanisms and instruments, statistics, including statistics and data, to inform the COVID-19 response and recovery policy. Of course, we understood very quickly that that we had a need there to support countries to become more resilient and to be able to provide a response to the impact of the COVID-19 and monitoring also recovery policy. But it's important for us as intergovernmental organization that our masters, the General Assembly, recognize that there is a need. The objective of this development account project, the 14th tranche, is to improve capability of beneficiary countries to meet COVID-19 data needs to recover better and enhance, and this is important, preparedness of national statistical system to respond to emerging economic, social, and of course, environmental needs for statistics and indicators in times of crisis and disasters. So this is exactly the right event we're having now, because this event is actually targeting directly this objective. Who is actually working together to implement this innovative project? We have 8 entities. We have the 5 regional commissions of the United Nations, Africa, Europe, Latin America and the Caribbean, Asia and the Pacific, and Western Asia. And we have on top of that 3 global entities that are not all involved in the same way, and you will see that later in the various work streams that we have, but they are all together: UNEP, UNODC, and UNSD. UNSD is the coordinator entity of the project, and I'm the coordinator of the project. The resources that we have so far are rather limited, 3 million for the years 2022 to 2025, but we are already working now on finding additional funding to support this project. Why? Because the demand is very big. We have a lot of requests for supports, and we definitely want, as much as we can, address them. How can we find these funds? There are different ways. Of course, for us, it's all to go through these mechanisms that we call development accounts. That is one. But we're also looking at external funds and support from partner organizations, might be bilateral partners or multilateral partners. So if there are a few here in this meeting, I mean, it would be good also if they are interested in what we are discussing and how we want to address the challenges, maybe to approach UNEP and ESCAP. So I told you that we have various work streams, and that all entities are, of course, not involved in each of these work streams, or they are involved, but not with the same intensity. So we have 2, or let's start for once with the statistical domain work streams. So the second point that I have here, we have 4 statistical domain work streams. The first one, that is the work stream 2.1, is on climate change and disaster-related statistics. I don't have to tell you more about that one, because we are going to discuss now the next days about challenges and good practices when it comes to climate change and disaster-related statistics. We have one on monitoring economic disparities, because we know that every crisis, has an impact on disparities within countries, but also between countries. We have one on measuring gender and social discrimination. Again, it's rather clear to understand the impact of these crises on gender and social discrimination. And the last one is on assessing the impact of the economy on the environment. As we know, I mean, after COVID-19, we have relaunched our economy, but we also have to be careful that this relaunch or reboot of our economy and our exchanges do not affect our environment, and we remain aligned with our environmental objectives, also this one that we have in the SDGs. Now you understand, and this is also the purpose of this meeting, that we need something more in order to be more resilient, agile, and address climate change and disaster needs for statistics and data. And that's why we have additionally 2 cross-cutting work streams. These 2 cross-cutting work streams, work stream 1.1 and 1.2, are actually work streams that are in service, if I can say like this, of the 4 statistical domain work streams. The first one is on governance. We have noticed that we have not been very good, and it was mentioned in the opening, we have not been very good in actually engaging our users. Who are they? Not only these ones that we know, but the potential one. And we have not been very good in engaging with the data communities, other producers, collectors of data and statistics that actually are maybe not part of the national statistical system, but could help us in producing these indicators and statistics. And the second one, and you're going to discuss it, it's about innovation. What are the alternative data sources that exist already in the country or that we could develop in order to produce higher quality, more disaggregated and timely statistics and indicators? And we know that in times of crisis, this is something that is extremely important. How we are going to work, I mean, we have two levels of interventions that we call also sometimes segments. The first one is multi-country activities. And the first one and the second one is addressing target country activities and needs. We are now in the first level of intervention, typically with this webinar. It is about sub-regional, regional, and interregional events and activities. But the purpose of this project is also to help us to develop and sometimes to translate methodological guidelines, tools, learning material, including e-learning. This is for the first level of intervention. For the second level of intervention, it will be target country oriented. So basically all together, the 8 entities for the 6 work streams, we are going to identify 15 target countries. And for each of these target countries, we are going to develop a roadmap, identifying clearly what are the objectives and what are the indicator of achievement to be developed for these different countries. Once we have that, we will start with delivering assistance, help, to these countries to reach the objective that jointly we have established. We are still not there with the identification of the 15 countries. We're going to start, or we are in the process to start, but the idea is that in September this year, we have that list. And I would say that later this fall, beginning of winter, we will start to work with these countries. So this is all for my presentation. I hope that you understand a little bit the context of this development account 14 strand on resilient and agile national statistical systems. And if you have further questions, you can address them here in the chat, or you can send me also an email. Thank you very much. And I wish you all a fruitful webinar. Thank you. Back to you, Katja.
Thank you, Gabriel, for the introduction of the whole project. We believe that the project will help national statistical offices and other relevant agencies improve their resilience, including better knowledge of climate change and disaster-related statistics. And before moving on to questions related to the project as a whole, I would like to invite Roxy Lee to share the results of the pre-webinar survey with you. Roxy is associated expert in the SDG and Environment Statistics Unit of UNEP. All of you have already met her through the emails related to the webinar. Roxy, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katja. Hello, everyone. My name is Roxy. Today, I'm going to present results of the pre-webinar survey. Who have already filled in the form of the survey. And it really helps us to understand your perspective and the request at the country level. Okay. Okay, sorry, I cannot share my screen.
Just stop sharing your screen and maybe share again.
Yes.
Reshare your screen.
Okay. Okay, it works now. So we have received 28 responses from 16 countries. As you may see in this map, many of them are from Africa, and we see some from Africa and the Caribbean regions. And for the section 1, we request the responses for the personal profile. We can see from the first pie chart, we almost have the balanced gender, half and half for male and female. And for the type of organization you work for, we received the respondents 50% from national statistical offices and nearly 30% from other governmental ministry or agency responsible for climate change. I will stop sharing again. I think it will be better for me to not use the speaker mode. I will share again. Sorry. In terms of section 2, we asked a question about climate change related statistics in terms of a level of knowledge about indicators and the methodologies for climate change statistics. I'm so happy to notice that, which means that there are experts with highly excellent knowledge on this level of the knowledge about the indicators and the methodologies for climate change and the global set of climate change statistics and indicators. That means so for these people, you are more than welcome to share your comments during the Q&A session. And for the rest of the participants, we organize this webinar just for you. Please don't hesitate to post your question in the chat box. And there will be a list of experts joining us today to answer your questions with their rich knowledge on climate change and disasters. And in terms of the climate change level of demand for official statistics on climate change in your country and level of development of climate change statistics in your country, we can see that more than 70% of the people, which is a very large percent, have the high demand and very high demand. 70% highly developed and very highly developed, but 50% moderately developed and 40% not developed or slightly developed. In terms of disaster-related statistics, this is the session for tomorrow. We asked a question about level of awareness and knowledge of disaster-related statistics framework and level of knowledge about indicators and methodologies for disaster-related statistics. So we may see that there is no excellent knowledge compared with the climate change statistics. We didn't see the excellent knowledge on disaster-related statistics, but we see like nearly 90 or even above % responses show that they are lack of knowledge or no knowledge at all. In terms of the level of demand for official statistics on disasters in your country and the level of development of disaster-related statistics in your country, we can also see the same circumstances, that most of the responses shows that they are lack of the knowledge and they are highly demanded for the official statistics on disasters, and they need highly demand the development of disaster statistical related statistics. And we also see many of the keywords from your comments in the survey. For example, climate change, Sendai framework, carbon, disaster resilience. They will all be discussed in our webinar. So this is all about the pre-webinar survey, and thank you. Back to you, Katia.
Thank you, Roxy, a lot. This was very interesting to know, and I think that the message was received very well, and I'm glad. I think our team is very happy that we can support, to increase your level of knowledge in these very important areas. Thank you so much. And now the time for questions and answers came. Please raise your hand or post your question in the chat if you have any general questions. And by the way, I see one question from Liberia, and I see answer to this question from Gabriel. But Gabriel, if you are with us, let me read the question and invite you to answer or repeat your answer, please. The question is, thank you for presentation. I wonder if the statistical domain workstream was only relevant for national statistics and finance officers. Please, Gabriel.
Yes, thank you, Katya, and thank you also for this question. It's a very important one, right? I mean, of course, and we will discuss that further the last day, but the project and this work stream, but this you can confirm, Katya, is not all about the National Statistical Office. The National Statistical Office has, in many countries, in particular in smaller ones, a key role because this is the center, often the center of competence when it comes to data, statistics, and indicators. But the idea of this work stream and the overall project is to be more resilient and flexible by interacting and working together with other data communities outside the National Statistical Office. Those could be within the administration, government, but also other very important actors. It could be private, it can be citizen-generated data and others. So the work stream is there mainly to address a demand for statistics indicators, high quality, disaggregated, timely, and then to find who and how we can address these demands. This is the important point for this project. So I reassure you, not all about the National Statistical Office, but still we believe the National Statistical Offices are important key player in this domain. Thank you.
Yes, thank you a lot, Gabriel, for this answer. And we have 2 more questions that, by the way, we have more questions, but we will discuss them during the webinar. Questions that we received from the pre-webinar survey. One of them is from Côte d'Ivoire, and this question is, I would have liked to have seen young academics who are working to publish writings on those themes also invited. This webinar was organized, for very different groups of stakeholders. And when we thought about how to invite different stakeholders, we decided to send, to find a, let's call a coordinator or focal point in each country. So because this project is about statistics and data, but not only about statistics and data. First of all, we contacted national statistical offices, and we asked them to contact different relevant organizations in their countries and invite them, to attend this webinar. So definitely, young academics are welcome, and if any of them received the invitation, we are very happy to see them here. At the same time, after the webinar, in few weeks after the webinar, because we need time for preparation, we will publish all the materials online, including this recording webinar. So if you think that someone missed this very important information, please, we will share the link with all of you, and feel free to share this link with your colleagues if they didn't attend this webinar. And one more question from Indonesia. And by the way, I think I already covered the answer. I want to ask about certificates. Will I get a certificate if I take part in this webinar? No, this webinar, after this webinar, you will not get any certificates, because this webinar is more informative. but not a training. So the idea is that we want to share information with you, and you are welcome, to communicate with us in the future. But yet this webinar is not a training, so you will not get any certificate. I think we are done with questions, and I don't see any other hands. And because of that, let's move on to the next session. Session 2. Session 2 will focus on the policy side of the subject and provide some examples of the demand for climate change and disaster-related statistics at the global level. This session will include 4 presentations, after which we will have a block for questions and answers. At the same time, feel free to post your questions in the chat. To speak about the Paris Agreement, the first ever universal, legally binding global climate change agreement, as well as about the latest conference of the parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, COP27, let me invite Vlad Truska, manager of the Information Hub Data Systems and Tools Subdivision of the UNFCCC Secretariat based in Bonn, Germany. Vlad, I hope you are with us. Yes,
yeah.
I can
see. Hi, Katerina. Thank you so much for inviting me. First of all, thanks to UNEP and ESCAP for this invitation. Let me try to share my screen. I know that you also have my presentation, but I think I can do this from my end. I don't know if you see. Yes, you see it. Okay.
You can see your screen.
Good. So as you mentioned, there is a lot of information that is needed and is more coming in the next years now under the Paris Agreement. And I wanted to make this connection because we often hear about these situations with the environment ministries or agencies in the countries and their cooperation with the statistical offices. So I wanted to touch base on this, but first of all to look on the who we are and what we are doing in the Secretariat. So again, I hope that many of the participants already know about the UNFCCC Secretariat. I won't go too much into the details. We are in charge of the entire climate change negotiations, but also in the implementation of the convention, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement. What I wanted to point out is that we have already quite some time now. I think it's more than 5 and 6 years since we are having this enhanced cooperation with the UN Statistical Division, and especially with the environment section, environment statistics section in UNSD. We worked a lot together in the last years to come together with this global set of climate change statistics and indicators, but also to put in front of the Statistical Commission joint reports, and also to organize the events where we participate each other into the events, or events where we bring together the statistical offices, the statistical community, and the authorities that are responsible with climate change reporting. Now, looking a bit on the Paris Agreement, because again, I was asked to try to summarize and to look on the understanding of the Paris Agreement. Basically, we have 3 layers. And you look at the objectives, you look at the long-term temperature goal, the climate resilience, and the financial flows. And then these general objectives, they are put into operation by the action on adaptation and mitigation on one side, but also using the means of implementation in terms of finance, capacity building, and technology development and transfer. This will not exist in such a way if the parties will not be accountable for the actions and the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And this accountability comes under the three main pillars. We speak about the transparency of action and support. We talk about the global stocktake. We know, some of you might know that this is this year we have the first global stocktake that will happen, and also the idea of facilitating the implementation and promoting compliance to the Paris Agreement. Now, looking on how these are linked, the main steps of the let's say the ambition process under the Paris Agreement. Basically, parties are communicating their nationally determined contributions, and that's the first step. And then parties will be reporting their biennial transparency reports, these BTRs. I'm sorry, we use a lot of abbreviations in our world, but some of you might have heard about this, so I'm trying to read them out. This biennial transparency reports, the obligation for parties is from the end of next year. So the deadline, the first deadline is 31st of December next year, 2024, for parties to start submitting this biennial transparency reports every 2 years. So the first one will be coming from let's say the end of next year. And these biennial transparency reports will consist of the greenhouse gas inventory, so their greenhouse gas emissions estimated in the country, the tracking progress towards achieving the country national determined contribution, information on impacts and adaptation, and very important information on the support provided and mobilized by the developed countries and the support needed and received by the developing countries. This process doesn't end with the submission of information. It also continues with the review of this information and the final consideration of this process. Then everything is part of this global stocktake that comes every 5 years, looking of where the parties are in terms of the ambition under the Paris Agreement. Now, looking more into details in terms of this enhanced transparency framework, as I mentioned, there are these 3 steps into the enhanced transparency framework: the reporting, the review, and the consideration. You see here, as I said, what the countries are supposed to report, but then how the technical expert review process happens, this review by independent experts that are looking into the reports that the parties submitted and the information that is being reviewed. Then the last part of the process is where parties are asking each other questions in terms of the reports and the review that happened for that report. Now, looking at the fundamental of this transparency framework and the enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement, this is not something new. We are building on and enhancing of something that parties have already done. For some countries, especially the developed countries, this reporting process is going on for more than 20 years now. And there's a lot of experience and efforts that were put to make sure that the reporting is improved every year. This is also happening lately with the developing countries that started to report under the convention, their biennial update reports or their national inventories or national communications. They learned from this process. Now, as mentioned, countries are starting from different points. What the developed countries, for example, were reporting every year, their national greenhouse gas emissions. This was not happening for the developing countries that had this obligation to report from time to time doing their into their national communications or biennial update reports. So we are starting from different points, but there is this idea of the continuous improvements. There is also the flexibility. Indeed, from now on, from under the Paris Agreement, we have only one set of guidelines. In the past, under the convention, some of you might know, we had a set of guidelines for the developed countries and another one for the developing countries. Now there is only one set of guidelines. All the countries, for example, will need to follow the IPCC guidelines, the revised 2006 IPCC guidelines. But there is also this flexibility embedded into the modalities and procedures and guidelines, where there's different starting years from which the parties could report different gases and so on. There will be no enhanced transparency framework without support, and this is well understood by all countries when they were finalizing the negotiations for this enhanced transparency framework. And this is something that we are working a lot with a lot of countries to make sure that the support comes to them, and then parties will be able to report. This is just an overview of how the negotiation process, you see on the top of the slide. This is the negotiation process on climate change, starting from the convention and finishing in the last conference of the parties that we had in Sharm el-Sheikh end of last year, and I will come back to that. And on the lower part of the slide, you see the reporting, the transparency process, the reporting and review process, how it evolved from again the first reviews that happened in 1995 until the last negotiations that we had for the transparency issues. Now, looking at the institutional arrangements, there is something that I keep saying when discussing about the role of the national statistical offices in this process. There is a very important need to have a strong institutional arrangement in the country. We have a lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of cooperation at the international level. We work together with UNSD, we work with UNEP, with UNDP, and so on. But this will not solve the problems at the domestic level. At the domestic level, you need to have this very good cooperation between institutions to be able to report climate change information. You know, climate change is everything from ocean to I don't know, waste. So you need to have this strong institutional arrangements. And in some countries, it is quite simple. You have this understanding between institutions. You don't need much. Information is flowing, data is coming. In other countries, you need maybe strong legal instruments like memorandum of understandings or even government decisions to make sure that the information is flowing, and also the agency or the ministry that is in charge of reporting to UNFCCC all this information has the right means and the data to be able to estimate the emissions and to provide this other information. So again, there's no prescribed set of institutional requirements. It is based on countries' conditions, countries' situations, but there is, I think, an important role for the NSOs to be involved in this process. And there is also an opportunity. I know that there will be not, the NSOs will not be able to provide all the data that is necessary for the respective institutions to calculate emissions or to report, but there will be a lot of support that the NSOs could provide by giving the annual statistical yearbooks, by the energy balances, information of some data that is not actually available in the statistical office, but might be available in the, I don't know, customs offices or transport registration offices. So there is again, and there is this need to bridge the gap between the statistical offices and the environment institutions to make sure that they work together. A little bit of the benefits of transparency and the enhanced transparency framework is this idea of both nationally, it will help you to get acceptance at the political level. It will help you to plan the policies. And actually probably the most important one, it will help you to access support, because a lot of donors will come to your country and ask you where they can support, what things can be done, and they will look for the data. It's extremely important to have good data on what your policies and your NDCs look like, and you need to have a basis for this to be able to access support. On the other side, internationally, it is about building trust between parties, meeting the obligations, and also prioritizing support and looking at enhancing the ambition. Now, because I had to combine this presentation, I have to apologize. I won't be able to join you tomorrow in the meeting. I wanted to look a little bit, and I won't take a lot of time for this, but I was also asked what were the main outcomes of the conference of the parties that happened in Sharm el-Sheikh. We have these annual conferences of the parties under the Convention, Kyoto Protocol, and Paris Agreement, and this is the biggest annual UN event in the world. The last one happened in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt in December 2022. And I think the participants were around 30,000 people, registered participants with badges. So just for you to have an idea how big these events are. In terms of the major headlines of negotiations, the parties, so the countries in the world, they agreed that there is still a concern in terms of the meeting the goal of 1.5 degrees. And this is the fact that the trends are still not in line with this scenario. So parties need to do more in terms of their climate action, but also looking at how parties can enhance and update their national determined contribution by the next COP that will happen this year in December. Then looking at the implementation, again, parties agreed to have this just, equitable, and inclusive transition to the low emission and climate resilient development. Looking at the need for immediate and rapid GHG emission reductions, and also the role of renewable energy in the transition, and the idea to have a call for the coal phase down and phase out of fossil fuel subsidies. In terms of the loss and damage, because this is also something that will be touched upon in this webinar, there was this decision to establish a fund for responding to loss and damage, and then to make arrangements for the fund to become operational. This is happening this year. There is this transitional committee that is will be making recommendations by COP28. And also there is this arrangements happening on the Santiago network on loss and damage to make sure that the technical assistance is catalyzed. But also this support for the UN Secretary General call on universal coverage of early warning systems. There were a lot of other essential mandates coming from COP27. And again, I won't read, you will have this presentation available. And here is just a snapshot of what happened on finance, mitigation, adaptation, transparency, and cross-cutting. You have this mandates that the parties were able to agree in Sharm el-Sheikh for all these sectors. I know that I'm running out of time, so this is why thank you so much again for inviting me. Thank you for the possibility to present. And again, if you want to find out more, you have these links, and the presentation will be provided at the end of the webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vlad, a lot for this extremely informative presentation. Let's call, indeed, the Paris Agreement is very powerful, and we still need to make a lot of efforts at all levels, national, regional, and global. And I see some questions to you, but let's wait by the end of this session, and we would be happy to, if you could stay with us at the end of this session.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And next presentation focuses on the Sendai framework, the first major agreement that provides member states with concrete actions to protect development gains from the risk of disaster. And I invite Umesh Kumar, head of the United Nations for Disaster Risk Reduction Office, UNDRR in Bonn. Animesh shared a pre-recorded presentation with us and said that he would try to attend, but it is a little difficult because of several other events he has in parallel. So I asked my colleague Purpot to share a pre-recorded presentation we received from Animesh. Thank you.
A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues. My name is Animesh Kumar, and I'm the head of UNDRR office based here in Bonn. Apologies that I'm unable to present it live today because we have an ongoing event on loss and damage tracking today and tomorrow. In my presentation today, I will be talking about the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction and how the associated monitoring system has helped generate official statistics for disaster risk reduction, resulting in better accountability in risk governance. All of us know that the year 2015, often called as the year of resilience, was one of the key years in which a series of international agreements and frameworks were adopted. The Sendai Framework was among the first of them. What made the Sendai Framework unique compared to its predecessor, the Hyogo Framework for Action, was a series of 7 targets that were also endorsed with the process. The first 4 targets focused on reducing losses and damages resulting from disasters, and the latter 3 targets focused on governance-related elements, including policies and strategies in financing and early warning systems. As we speak, there are more than 150 countries that are using this monitoring system to report on their DRR progress. Around 80 of these countries have managed to report on all the targets at least once. We have already reached the midterm stage of the Sendai Framework, and as you can see from the graphic, the progress in attaining the targets of the Sendai Framework is a bit mixed at this stage. But thanks to the huge volume of data that have been consistently reported by the governments, we not only know which are the places where some progress has been seen and which are the places where more acceleration is required. In 2 weeks from now, we will be meeting in New York to take some decisions through a political declaration at the high-level meeting on the midterm review of the Sendai Framework. A series of different thematic reports have also been generated by UNDRR collaborating with partners. For example, last year we worked on a global status report on early warning system, which is one of the baseline reports for the Early Warnings for All initiative as well. We have also been generating official reports, which the Secretary General of the UN has been reporting against the progress in Sendai Framework to the UN General Assembly. Also, we have documented progress in disaster risk reduction using the official statistics through the global assessment reports and many other reports. One of the key things that we have also managed to achieve through the Sendai Framework monitoring process is to ensure that the SDG reporting process and the Sendai Framework processes are aligned. Some of the selected indicators of SDGs 1, 11, and 13, for example, benefit from the indicators from the Sendai Framework, and we act as the custodian organization to ensure that the countries do not have to report twice. Several of the SDG reports, for instance, have captured this data and have been recurrently reporting on an annual basis. Several of the intergovernmental processes as well have benefited from the matrix, the targets and indicators, for example, from the Sendai framework. Examples include the Samoa pathway, the New Urban Agenda. We also hope the same will also benefit the Vienna Program of Action, the LDC-5. More recently, we are seeing a very strong demand from the climate community through the global stocktake process, the ongoing development of the global goal on adaptation and associated indicators, but also in more naturally in context of the loss and damage discussion, where the Sendai targets ABCD and other disaster impact related data officially collected and reported by the governments are being seen as a key source of information to inform the loss and damage discussions. Our partner organizations have also benefited from such data, and we are very happy for this collaboration to see the diverse application of such data in different fields. Now, moving forward, how do we strengthen and how are we ensuring that the overall data ecosystem of disaster risk reduction is further strengthened? One of the key things that happened while endorsing the Sendai framework targets and indicators were also in context of developing the right methodologies, terminologies, and associated metadata that helps really understand how can we develop the right data standards for countries to report and ensure international comparability. We are also very much aware that countries, for them to report properly and coherently, need a set of data standards. And we have been working with different partner organizations to ensure that we have the right data standards in place. Examples include the hazard classification system that UNDRR and the International Science Council have worked on. We are very much happy with the collaboration we have with different regional economic commissions in context of the disaster related statistics framework that is currently being developed, which was actually pioneered by ESCAP. We are very much hopeful that the new common framework for disaster related statistics will be endorsed very soon as we progress. And in this context, the upcoming forum on producers and users of disaster related statistics in Bangkok in June will be very much helpful. Now, while we are working towards ensuring countries report with the right standards and data in place, we also understand the capacity limitations and hence have been providing technical assistance to countries together with partners to ensure that the countries record their losses and damages in a systematic way. Our key approach to providing this technical assistance to countries is through what we call as Disinventar, a tool loss and damage tracking system, which is currently being used by 110 countries. This provides a very comprehensive pictures of losses and damages at subnational level, and in some cases going down to the lowest administrative units in the country. These are nationally owned systems, and the data are all collected by the governments using homogeneous methodologies to track events at all scales and help countries better report in Sendai framework, but also in a variety of applications. These databases have found very high usability across different use cases. For example, starting with the very understanding of the extent of losses and damages, and also understanding the evidence of impact of the climate change. They also help us understand how to benchmark the success or failure of resilience building, the success or failure of early warning systems, informing and calibrating risk models, insurance products, but also informing how the post-disaster needs assessment can ensure collection of existing data, but then further inform back the loss and damage tracking system. Overall, it gives a comprehensive picture in terms of how we are faring against the principles and objectives of sustainable development. Now, I just mentioned that this system was first developed in 1994 and has been in the operation for the last 25 years, which one talks about how sustainable and simple the system is, but at the same time also tells us that it needs a bit of a change because it is not in a position to speak to the new technology, have higher level of interoperability, and so on. We also understand that how the DRR ecosystem have further strengthened, but at the same time, there are institutional barriers in terms of capacities for disaggregation of data, in terms of horizontal and vertical coordination. There are also better emerging needs in context of understanding how the full data value chain, starting from the weather-related information and the other hazardous events linked with disaster impact system. One of the key things we have also noticed that disasters don't happen in isolation, but have cascading impacts. And with that be the case, how can you link different events over time so that we have a full understanding of the health value chain? The emergence of recent hazard classification, as I just talked about, using standard terminologies and so on, are also important developments that need to be ensured that we integrate into the new system. Acknowledging these challenges, we have collaborated with UNDP and WMO to develop a new generation loss and damage tracking system that will replace eventually Disinventar. The new system will be much more comprehensive, will have higher levels of interoperability. Started the process with a discovery and needs analysis, following which we have developed a vision and roadmap. We also understand that the new model should not be a one-size-fits-all model, but will be suited to the context of each of the countries, for which we have done an analysis with UNDP on data and digital maturity across a selection of countries. Last year in November, we had organized a loss and damage tracking workshop in Bonn, which was just 2 weeks after the COP27, which was very successful in the sense that we got very positive and constructive feedback on how the new system will look like, following which a prototype of the new system has been developed, which is what we are actually presenting today and tomorrow in the next workshop in Bonn. Understanding that the data value chain of loss and damage tracking is incomplete without a full understanding of the hazardous events that cause them, the partnership in that context with WMO is very helpful because it helps link climate-related variables with the resultant impact. This is a methodology that WMO Congress approved in 2019, and it provides a basis to the national Met offices to systematically record the parameters of hazardous events. And this is very important in the context that it not only helps us look into the impact of events, but also their causal factors. We are ensuring that while we discuss this in context of weather-related events, we should also be discussing the same with other hazardous events to fully understand the data value chain and have a better sense of the interconnected and cascading nature of events. So I will end my presentation with that, with a brief snapshot of how are we progressing in strengthening the DRR ecosystem. Unfortunately, I'm not there to answer the questions, but will be very happy to respond to any queries if sent to me by email. And I look forward to speaking again in the next iteration of this webinar, where I'll be presenting live. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Animesh, for this presentation, even if you are not with us online, but it was very interesting and informative. And one more important area that we would like to cover during this session is the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and SDG indicators related to climate change and disasters. To speak about data availability and gaps for relevant indicators, I invite Tara Pong, a statistician from the Statistics Division of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, based in Bangkok, Thailand. Please, Tara Pong, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Katia. I hope you can hear me and see my presentation. I'll be very brief because I think we have a lot of good presentations and speakers in the webinar. Talking about the demand for climate change and disaster-related statistics, we heard from Vad on the Paris Agreement, the reporting obligations, and this year's 2023 global stocktake activities is going on. We also heard from Animesh from the Sendai Framework, again, 2023 midpoint review and the results of the COP27 loss and damage funding mechanism that will require with more information for making sure that we could track the loss and damage resulted from disaster and including climate-induced disaster. needless to say, we have worked on the 2030 agenda over the past, let's say, 5 years. And this year is also a midpoint review of the SDG. When we talk about the climate change information, is much beyond SDG 13, as we all know that all the SDG goals are interconnected. So 2023 is actually a very special year. It's a very important year, and is a milestone that reminds us that we are in urgent need for better data. At least in the next 5 years, when we reach another milestone, when we see closer to the deadline that we set forth to ourselves in reporting to the achievement that we would like to achieve in all these global frameworks. That also requires better statistical standards implementation. That requires stronger national statistical system collaboration. We are talking about tackling global data availability and global data comparability challenges that we have seen. Data are generating from countries using the same statistical standards will ensure data comparability across countries of the world. And as also Animesh mentioned, we need to invest even more in countries' data capacity in response to growing data demands. So I can give you example from where I'm based, from Asia Pacific, in terms of the SDG indicators and some of the gaps from this part of the world. If we see from this chart, it may be very small, but I can quickly explain. So we did some analysis to compare all the SDG indicators with the global climate change indicator set that has been adopted at the UNSC last year. We found that there are about 40 indicators that are related to the SDGs in Asia Pacific. And when we started to analyze the progress that Asia Pacific region has been progressing so far, that we see some of the progress, but also clear gaps. First of all, a fourth of the climate change related SDGs in Asia Pacific do not have enough data to tell us where we are, to tell us who are having the issues in making progress in the commitments that we have. We don't know who are being left behind in 1/4 of the climate change related SDG indicators in Asia Pacific. And if you see from the indicators that we have data, majority of them have shown little progress. If you look at the chart, the blue bars show the progress, the positive progress, and you see the line cutting across all the indicators saying 2022. If the indicator reached that line, that means that we are on par in terms of the progress that we need to achieve. If you glance it quickly, there's just a few indicators that actually meet that milestone. We can also see that there are many indicators that are actually going backwards to much worse than where we were in 2000 when we started the SDG. The remarkable ones include, sadly to say, the greenhouse gas emission that fully regressed to the extreme. We also have the same situation in SDG 11.5.1 on death, missing, affected from population from disasters. So this shows us that a lot more effort needs to be put in place in terms of information and statistics. A lot more demand will be required to make sure that we have all the information that we need to make a difference. That calls for improving data ecosystem in the country. We know that there are existing data that we might have not been able to use them. So we want to maximize use of existing data. We want to unleash the untapped data potentials through the use of new technologies that Gabriel mentioned about to make sure that if we have the next crisis, that we are resilient towards making sure that the systems we are living in are capable of producing the required data that we need in any circumstances. I will stop here and happy to answer any questions that you may have. Back to you, Katia.
Thank you, Terpon, a lot for your presentation and this very interesting analysis that was done for your region. I think it could be, curious to see similar analysis for other regions as well in the future. And just based on your presentation, I think it's clear that countries still require significant capacity building support to fill data gaps. And I think not only in Asian Pacific region, but of course in many other regions as well. And I still wait, colleagues. I still ask colleagues to wait a bit for one more presentation, and after that we will have block for questions and answers. Please. One more interesting presentation, and the last one for this session is about UNEP emissions and adaptation gap reports. Thus, commenting on the emissions gap report 2022, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that unless countries dramatically scale up their efforts to counter the climate crisis, the world faces a global catastrophe. To speak about this report, I invite Kaisa Uesima, Program Management Officer from the Thematic Assessment Unit of UNEP, based in Nairobi, Kenya. Kaisa, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. First of all, do you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. And then I will share my screen. Let's hope this works. There.
Yes, we can see your screen.
And then I hope you can see the presentation also.
Yes, we can see the presentation.
All right, good.
In the presentation mode.
Good, perfect. So first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity to give you a brief overview of UNEP's two climate science reports, the emissions gap report and adaptation gap report. And as Brennan mentioned in her opening remarks, UNEP supports evidence-based decision-making to tackle environmental challenges, and therefore the main purpose of these two climate science, global climate science assessment reports is to inform the annual UN climate negotiations and the broader climate change discussion as a whole, and to bring the latest science on climate change mitigation and adaptation to the decision makers. And Katja already introduced me, so my name is Kaisa Uusima, and I work in the on the coordination of these two reports. So UNEP has published its emissions gap report since 2010, and it provides an annual assessment of the gap between estimated future greenhouse gas emissions if countries implement their climate mitigation pledges, and the reductions needed to limit global warming well below 2 degrees and pursuing 1.5 degrees, which are the temperature goals of the Paris agreements that Vlad, for example, spoke about before. So in brief, the emissions gap could be described as the difference of where global emissions are likely to be and where they should be to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And in addition, each edition of the emissions gap report explores ways to bridge this emissions gap. And we have had various themes in the previous editions. And it should be emphasized that the gap reports are first and foremost assessment reports, meaning that they're synthesis of the latest scientific and peer-reviewed literature, models, and data that's available. And the authors of the reports are leading scientists in the field, and they are guided by globally representative steering committee as well as the reports secretariat. And as mentioned, these the main purpose of the reports are to influence and inform the climate negotiations. So they are launched each year before the climate negotiations, and sometimes by the UN Secretary General himself. And Katja provided a nice introduction and giving a quote from the Secretary General on the gap reports. And each year these reports are widely covered in the international media, and this kind of visibility is also very important in order to ensure that these reports do inform and policies and actions by member states. So very briefly, what are the sort of key messages from the reports? So first of all, the emissions gap report tells us that global greenhouse gas emissions continue to rise and are reaching new records. And the last year's report also confirmed that the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, resulted in only a very short-lived reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions, and the emissions reduced approximately 4.7% between 2019 and 20, but then unfortunately bounced back to the 2019 levels as soon as the pandemic ended. So this kind of shows that the pandemic was a lost opportunity to get on a different pathway to reduce our emissions. Then I earlier said that the emissions gap could be described as the difference between where emissions are heading and where they should be to reach the Paris Agreement goals if countries implement their pledges. And this figure, what we call the gap figure, shows where emissions are heading under the current policies and under the unconditional nationally determined contributions and the conditional nationally determined contribution scenarios. And it shows that the unconditional NDCs and the conditional NDCs reduce emissions by 5 and 10% respectively. And in order for us to reach the Paris Agreement goals of 2 degrees and 1.5 degrees, these reductions should be in the magnitude of 30% and 45% respectively. So this shows that we're, like, despite countries making pledges and absolutely every fraction of a degree matters, but we are still quite far from reaching these temperature goals, and really a large-scale systematic transformation is needed to avoid a climate crisis. So the science from the emissions gap report is clear, and therefore it's almost like a little sister, the adaptation gap report. UNEP has been publishing this since 2014. And it has provided a regular and a robust assessment of adaptation efforts globally, and it's looking at our progress when it comes to adaptation planning, financing, and implementation. And similarly to the emissions gap report, each edition has a thematic deep dive focus area that is of particular interest to the climate negotiations. For example, last year we looked at effectiveness of adaptation, and this year, as other colleagues have mentioned before, one of the important outcomes of COP27 was loss and damage. So this year we'll have a deep dive in loss and damage. And similarly to the emissions gap report, it is an assessment report that's mostly based on recent and peer-reviewed scientifically credible information on progress and adaptation across multiple dimensions. But then also, of course, looks at the information submitted by countries through the UNFCCC. It too is also authored by leading experts in this field, and the report is released ahead of the climate negotiations each year, few weeks before the negotiations. And again, the high-level messages from the adaptation gap report is that as climate risks are rising and as global warming accelerates, so both mitigation and adaptations are really key to help vulnerable countries and communities to cope with the impacts of climate change. And the latest report demonstrated that global efforts in these three areas, adaptation planning, financing, and implementation, are actually increasing and improving, but they're not really keeping up with the increased risks as global warming accelerates. And since last year's report looked at effectiveness, one challenge I wanted to highlight here is that the data to quantify effectiveness and adequacy of adaptation is limited, and it's needed, and the methodologies to do that on a global level are sort of a work in progress, and whether it should be more of a top-down with established standardized indicators, or more of a bottom-up approach with using multiple local level assessment that actually may be closer to the local realities on ground. So in conclusion, the emissions gap report demonstrates that and provides the evidence that the pledges made by governments are still not enough to close the emissions gap and reach the Paris Agreement temperature goals, and urgent transformation is needed. And therefore, in addition to reducing emissions, climate change adaptation too must be considered a high global priority, and also a priority at national and local levels. And by highlighting these alarming messages and bringing the latest science to the decision makers, these gap reports continue to catalyze climate action and influence policies and actions by member states. And we are particularly happy that both of these reports were cited in the outcome document of the previous COP, the Sharm el-Sheikh implementation plan, and they were cited as the supportive scientific evidence for the actions. So it's we are very pleased to see that the reports are certainly welcomed and being used by countries as evidence. So thank you so much for your attention. This was a very quick overview of the two reports, but I would definitely welcome you to have a look at these two websites and the reports themselves, and the various communication assets that are available to summarize the reports. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kaisa, a lot for your very interesting presentation. I think for some of our participants, this information was quite new, and we're glad to share, something new with you, not just some updates about previous, topics that you were already familiar with. And we're a bit late with our agenda, but let's have a block for questions and comments after these 4 very interesting presentations. And I see a hand from Ivan. Please, Ivan, the floor is yours.
Gracias. ¿Me escuchan bien?
Are you going to speak Spanish?
Gracias. Quisiera agradecer su presentación y quisiera agradecerles sus comentarios muy nutritivos y agradecidos como gobierno. Mi nombre es Iván Delgado, soy director de Cambio Climático de Costa Rica. Quiero decir 2 cosas importantes. Uno, que desde Cambio Climático y gracias a la R5 del IPCC, logramos entender que tenemos muchas cosas en común con la gestión del riesgo y tenemos mucho que aprender. Incluso creo que a veces estamos duplicando el trabajo que ya se viene haciendo desde la gestión del riesgo. Sin embargo, adaptación viene a darle un toque más fresco a la gestión del riesgo, porque estamos hablando de la prevención, estamos hablando de intervenciones sociales para modificar conductas, permitir ajustes, permitir respuestas y poder demostrar que reducimos pérdidas y daños. Pero me llama la atención, compañeras y compañeros, que siempre, como en el reporte que viene ahora sobre adaptación, lo que ustedes vieron era una gran ola que venía a nosotros atacándonos. Y siempre sentimos, o siempre he sentido, que le ponemos el miedo a los eventos climáticos, le ponemos el miedo a los cuerpos de agua, el miedo está en el río, el miedo está en el mar, el miedo está en el cielo. La pregunta es, ¿el problema está en el cielo o el problema está en la tierra? Y yo creo que los elementos estadísticos que nos han mostrado hoy los compañeros hablan de que es importante entender que tenemos que trabajar las condiciones sociales, la exposición. Y aquí una pregunta, ¿por qué en las estadísticas no se separan vulnerabilidad y ponen fragilidad, ponen exposición, como hacíamos en la R4? Yo creo que al olvidar la R4, donde poníamos énfasis en vulnerabilidad, nos perdimos solo en la planificación del riesgo y no estamos viendo que tenemos que trabajar las condiciones sociales. El problema está en la tierra, no siempre en el cielo. Cambio. Muchas gracias.
Ivan, thanks a lot for your question. I understand that your question was general, but not to a specific speaker, or maybe I lost something in the beginning of your question. Colleagues, I think the Kaiser, Vlad, Terrapunk, please, and I see Terrapunk face, so I propose maybe to start from Terrapunk.
Yes, thanks.
Feel free to provide your reflections.
Thanks, Katia, and thanks.
Justamente era para él, pero no sabía el nombre, porque vi que él presentó unas estadísticas y vi que no estaban desagregadas. Vi vulnerabilidad, vi adaptación, pero no vi en vulnerabilidad, por ejemplo, desagregado fragilidad, capacidades. No vi estadísticas de exposición, ¿viste? Para ponernos más exquisitos.
Please, Terrapunk.
Right. Sorry, I had to switch to English interpretation so that I could catch up. But yeah, thank you, Irvan, and in maybe the print on my presentation is too small, but indeed the the effort that the statistical committee have made so far did not disregard the social conditions that you mentioned. The social aspect of the climate change impact is very much central part of it. If you look at my presentation again, that there are a block of indicators on vulnerability. There's a block of indicator on adaptation. Needless to say, and Emil is on the screen too, so he can definitely highlight that. But in terms of I think you have made a very good point. When we generally talk about climate change, whether we like it or not, many dialogues still focus very much on reducing GHG emission, which is not incorrect. It's actually very correct. And ESCAP just launched a STEAM study report calling the race to the net zero. But we also have to be reminded that in our race to net zero society, there are people suffering along the way. And that's why we need to have information to inform adaptation measures to make sure that we capture the most vulnerable group of people. And that I think highlighted also from the NAP reports as well that UNEP highly presented. But yeah, I totally agree that we should not forget the social aspects of the climate change. Emil, I'm sure you can provide more insights into that.
Thank you very much. I'll try to do that briefly. I appreciate very much the comment from Senor Delgado. And I understand 3 points actually. One is that there is certain duplication between the disaster risk reduction issues and climate change issues. And that's something we try to alert about and speak about and urge countries to consider it by initiating the work on climate statistics in consultation with the climate authorities. That's the first step. Next, I see that actually it's possible that the environmental foundation of the whole work on climate statistics is stronger than the others. Somehow social and economic are less addressed here, but the main rationale for that is that actually those domains of statistics are stronger in itself. It's the environment, the one that has been lagging or less developed. That's why we had to focus major effort here. And the third, and I think the key point here, I understand. So yes, we have divided those 5 areas following the 4th assessment of IPCC. So vulnerability is there. And I'll speak a little bit more in my next talk on that. So I want to emphasize a number of indicators in the area of vulnerability and adaptation especially are at tier 3, which means we do not have enough understanding and enough guidance. We have introduced them like placeholders not to miss those important subjects, but we definitely need help and suggestions. And what we just heard is very appreciated in that aspect. I will be looking for more opportunities to address. I see more specific on fragility, more on exposition, although I would say exposition is more perhaps in the area of impacts. So yeah, it has to be seen in the whole spectrum of topics and indicators introduced in the global set. So yes, if I can follow up with more discussion with Senor Delgado, I'll be very happy to do that. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Emil and colleagues. We are late with our agenda, but just before going to break, I propose to answer for 2 more questions. The first one will be for Vlad, and this question is from our chat. So Vlad, interesting presentation. A question from
I saw the question. I saw the question. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So it's basically the support and training for adaptation chapter compilation. There are actually two ways of doing that. First of all, there is this consultative group of experts, And in their plan for this year, there's this preparation of training materials for reporting of adaptation action. And in addition to that, from last COP in Sharm, we got this mandate to ensure that we are providing the training for experts that will be reviewing the voluntary adaptation information, providing of this. So there are a lot of training activities that are happening in this period. And just again, look on the consultative group of experts. There are training activities under this consultative group of experts work plan. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Vlad, a lot for your very informative and brief reply. And in addition to your answer, and I saw one question from Nigeria about further training after this webinar, and I already replied that just under this project, in the future, we will have further trainings for target countries, and we will talk more in the end of this webinar. But at the same time, we have a lot of other projects, and as Vlad already mentioned, and we will have Yuma presentation again tomorrow about other projects, and we will have other opportunities to provide similar trainings. So of course, just let us know if you really need this support. Please contact us, because international organizations can help just based on countries' requests. So for us, it's very important to know who needs this support. Thank you, colleagues, a lot. I don't have any hands, and I would like to open, to move to 10 minutes break. And now is 14:44 GMT time, and I propose to continue our webinar at 14:54 GMT time, just to give some rest to our interpreters. Thank you so much. Roxy, can you please share a housekeeping slide? Roxy, 14:54. Dear participants, thank you for staying with us. And let me introduce session 3. This session will provide an overview of international statistical frameworks and guidance on climate change statistics. We will hear the recommendations of experts from the United Nations Statistics Division and the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, as well as a country experience on the example of Tanzania. In March 2022, the United Nations Statistical Commission adopted the global set of climate change statistics and indicators as a framework for climate change statistics and indicators to be used by countries when preparing their own sets of climate change statistics and indicators according to the individual concerns, priorities, and resources. To speak about this work, I invite Emil Ivanov, statistician from the Environment Statistics Section, United Nations Statistics Division of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, based in New York. Emil, we already heard some comments from your end, but now, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Katya. Let me try to share my screen, and I need to make sure that I'm sharing the correct one because I got 3 of them. So can you see the full size of my slide?
Yeah, 100%.
Perfect, thank you. I'll try to speed up. I've got many slides and they are quite informative with a lot of details in them. I'll just highlight the key messages. And I will invite participants to have a look for additional information at their time later. I would also like to note that I can't stay beyond the end for GMT time because I got another meeting. So I would also encourage participants to type questions or to make sure that questions are raised before the end of meeting. Thank you. So let me continue with my talk. This presentation is, as Katya introduced, about the global set, and I will underline more emphasis on the recent activities following its adoption. That's on implementation support, further methodology development, and data collection activities. Yes, the global set was adopted at the 53rd session of the Statistical Commission in 2022, and the fact was highlighted in the report of the Secretary General on the work of the organization in 2022. We are quite pleased to see this, and further details can be seen on the link below. The process has taken more than 10 years. We submitted 4 report to the Statistical Commission. In 2016, there was the request to develop a global set. In 2018, a strong message to reinforce the link between policy and statistics via intensified collaboration with the Secretariat of UNFCCC in many ways, joint capacity development, but also joint development of this global set. In 2022, we presented the 4th report, which introduced the global set and led to its adoption. In short, the global set links the reporting requirements under the Paris Agreement with the available statistical guidelines, standards, frameworks, etc. This is structured according to the 5 policy areas defined in the 4th assessment of IPCC: drivers, impacts, vulnerability, mitigation, and adaptation. It includes 158 indicators accompanied by 190 statistics. The statistics were intentionally introduced next to the indicators, but was recommended by our expert group to help, on one hand, to make it more transparent what is required to compile the indicators, but also to enable those countries with less developed statistical systems and with less resources to embark on this important work. The structure of the global set is basically following the foundation of the framework for development of environment statistics, which presents climate as a cross-cutting area in chapter 5. But it's also similar, as we just saw the example of the analysis in ESCAP to the SDGs and the Sendai framework, in the sense that they all have metadata and they have similar structure with indicators, sub-indicators, etc. The key element here is the link between policy and statistics, as I said, and those are mapped explicitly. Most of the indicators follow the FDS, indicators and statistics jointly. Around 120 of them are informed by the methodology of the FDS. 51 of the indicators or statistics are actually SDGs. Most of them just as they are, but several had to be slightly adjusted to emphasize the link with climate. Then 46 indicators follow the System for Environmental Economic Accounting, the SEA, both the central framework and the ecosystem accounting part. 23 indicators are according to the International Recommendation for Energy Statistics, 12 follow the Sendai framework, and 10 follow the IPCC. Those relations are explicitly shown in the metadata. We have drafted a metadata sheet for each of the 158 indicators, and also the accompanying statistics. Here you can see those details. You can see short definitions and many other fields which I have not shown here, related to the relevance to climate change, international data collection activities, and key methodological guidelines available for each indicator. There is a growing engagement. In 2021, we conducted a global consultation to which 86 countries responded. You can see those in green here, but this number is constantly growing. We know of at least a dozen countries who performed the self-assessment based on the global set following that. And basically what countries are doing is initial steps to define their own sets of climate indicators or statistics, and certain structures to oversee the process, like establishing committees, working groups, etc. Following the adoption, our main effort in the last year has been to ensure adequate implementation support for it, for which we developed the Climate Change Statistics and Indicator Self-Assessment Tool, in brief, CSAT. Also implementation guidelines, which have been published online, and currently we are also working on a hard copy publication to be released this year, and we are also developing training materials and e-learning. In its most detailed form, the global set can be accessed via this self-assessment tool. We intentionally did that since this is indeed the first step when countries consider starting this work, namely to avoid duplication, as just underlined by our colleague, with other relevant work on the climate change side, but also on the disaster side and even other environmental policy areas. Also, a lot of background information and explanation of the process can be seen in the report of the Secretary General to the 53rd session of the Commission, and there are a couple of background reports accompanying this one, where you can see details on the global consultation and also details including all the metadata and descriptions of the global set. Implementation guidelines we started drafting while we were preparing the global set for adoption, which took more than 1 year with the help of international consultants. We just managed to publish this in March, and it consists of 5 sections. The first 3 are introductory and background, etc. I would like to emphasize that the 4th is quite important, since it presents, I would say, in simplest way, the most important steps for a country to set up a national program on climate. statistics. That's on one hand. Besides that, in section 5, we also emphasize the key steps to start producing and publishing climate change statistics. The aim is, of course, on one hand, to inform better the climate authorities, the climate policy experts in a country, how they can benefit from engaging with national statistics, because we have often seen that there is not sufficient understanding. Often there could be setting up of processes in parallel to processes that exist in the national statistics system. So that's on one hand. On the other, it also helps the national statistics offices to engage better in the climate policy area by understanding better what is climate change and what it requires in the 5 policy areas, etc. So the main objectives are to set up initial national consultation between the key stakeholders and to perform the self-assessment. The key stakeholders, of course, are the NSO. We have provided key lines here what this means. In short, I would say this is to ensure that official climate statistics in the country are produced according to the national criteria, what constitutes official statistics, how they are compiled, disseminated, and used, and how this is done following the fundamental principles of official statistics. It also explains key points, what is the role of the national focal points to UNFCCC, and other key stakeholders that need to be engaged in the process. We have also provided a number of country examples. I have here shown you that the statistical office of Mauritius has quite a unique configuration in sort of the centralized way, which has presented certain advantages to engage in the climate area maybe more rapidly than in other cases, but also they've been able to produce good start of this work. So I would emphasize once again that the first step is to start performing a self-assessment, for which the CSAT will help you how to apply the global set, and it will allow the country to produce an initial picture of what are the available resources in the country and what is missing, what is still needed to implement the monitoring of climate policies in the country. This should be completed, and it will materialize in a sort of a national action plan or implementation plan, for which we have illustrated a number of key steps again in the implementation guidelines. This can be seen. I would just emphasize that those are early examples. We cannot say that this is like a recipe. It's more like guidance and orientation. Certainly countries will see that in many cases there is a need to deviate from that or be creative. The self-assessment tool is built using the example of the FDS SAT, and this is combined with the questions from the global consultation that we did in 2021. It's composed of 2 parts. Part 1 focuses on the institutional dimensions, and part 2 addresses the statistics and indicators in the global set. This has also an introduction, short one. And what is different from the SAT that we have added here, also the metadata. This is a 300-page document, which is linked with the Excel file, and you can navigate by just clicking on any indicator. That should open the metadata automatically for you. But just to note, those are not online documents. You need to download them on your computer. And in order for this feature to work, you should not change the names of the files, and you should keep them in the same folder. Part 1, again, it addresses key institutional aspects like what policies exist in the country for climate change, what strategies, who has the mandate to develop climate change statistics in the country, what has been done so far. There could be reports, release of statistics, what sort of institutional collaboration is required, and what is the status of assistance and training for, on one hand, developing countries are encouraged to explain what assistance they need, and on other, the developed countries, what assistance they provide. Part 2 looks at the individual indicators and statistics. It's an Excel file, and you can see those indicators listed, and they are accompanied by the key policy references. This is explicitly the articles of the Paris Agreement and the reporting requirements from its work program adopted in Katowice. And there are further statistical references, including the FDS, the SDG, Sendai framework, and also references to the ECE list of core climate indicators. The next part is the self-assessment. It lists a number of key questions that will help you to complete the assessment, basically on the relevance. Is this indicator applicable to your country or not? On data availability, if you have data, this is to be recorded here, but more important, if you don't, and the indicator is relevant, the questions help you to complete this assessment that should allow you to prioritize future work. And finally, the methodological soundness is about the level of international comparability. So this part of the self-assessment has again 3 files, starting with instructions, how to complete it, the Excel file with the whole list, and the metadata. I will be faster, I guess I'm running out of time now. I mentioned that about a third of the indicators in the global set are at tier 3. And that was the status at the date of its adoption in 2022. So there are advances, of course, a number of areas we could prioritize, like gender, health, and disasters, because all of those have needs to develop further methodology, and also because we could engage with partners who are strong on the subject. Like on gender, we are mandated actually by the Statistical Commission to integrate gender into all statistical areas. On health, we are partnering with the UK ONS, who are leading a 4-year project to develop standards on climate and health statistics. On disasters, we have also been consulting that a number of indicators actually complement the Sendai framework. And we have seen that this work has been used by the EC task force on measuring disasters and developing a core set. There is also the need to constantly follow other developments, like the most recent was on the CBD biodiversity monitoring framework, for which we have about 20 indicators in the global set addressing biodiversity. So we need to follow up that to reflect it in the metadata and make sure that the tier 3 indicators could benefit from the relevant work on their side. I won't read that. It just explains the mandate to integrate gender into all statistical areas. And I will emphasize that the case of climate was also prioritized along with trade to illustrate advances on this. The global set addresses gender in various ways. About 15 indicators and 15 statistics have disaggregation by sex. 2 indicators address gender explicitly and 2 statistics as well. And that's not sufficient. The reason we are still working with our colleagues is to make sure that this progresses further. We are doing that in 2 ways. In our expert group on environment statistics, we dedicate a section on climate and gender, and the same thing happens in the expert group on gender statistics. Last year, this was done for first time, and this will be a continuous process from now on. Next, on data collection, I'll say a few words. So the foundation, as I mentioned, of the global set relies on the FDES, which presents 5 key categories of data collection sources: surveys and censuses, administrative data, remote sensing and GIS, monitoring systems and scientific research, special projects, etc. We introduced 2 more to expand the foundation so that it addresses better climate. And that's, of course, a lot of climate work relies on estimation and projections and modeling, like all the scenario analysis work. And also another category applies specifically for the inventories of GHGs, inventories of forest stocks and biomass, etc. So we have expanded slightly to address those more explicitly. A special area of work, special emphasis is that we note that since many years, since decades, I would say, work has been done by NSOs via surveys and sometimes even censuses, which may not be explicitly called climate change, but it is addressing the same issues, parameters, and data. So we're trying to collect those. On our website, we have a link where you can see what environment and climate related data is being collected in many countries in the world via censuses and surveys. For this, we had to, of course, partner closely, in more intensive way, both externally. An example is with the Pacific Community, SPC, and also with our colleagues in the demographic and social statistics section. Some examples I have on this slide about censuses with environment and climate questions. The most recent one I want to emphasize is from Tanzania, but I will say no more about it because the next presentation is exactly on the subject. Looking forward to hear it. I will also emphasize that climate can be also addressed in specialized surveys. 2 prominent examples from the world are from Nepal and Bangladesh, who both designed a specific national survey on climate change, and both were done 2 times already. A number of indicators in the global set need data from censuses and surveys. I have tried to emphasize here that especially in the areas of vulnerability and adaptation, this number is higher. Why is that? Because many of those are actually from the social and economic domains. They may not be called, again, explicitly climate, but they inform a number of the indicators in the global set. You can see here quite some examples listed. I won't speak about those. I'll just mention that in the global consultation of 2021, we asked explicitly, have you designed surveys or modules or questions in the censuses that address climate? And you can see a modest number of countries in the different regions of the world who said, yes, this information is available on our website. And you can check, but I want to mention that this is kind of outdated now. Already 2 years have passed and we have learned for a lot more developments beside those. Just to emphasize concluding remarks on data collections, we encourage countries to expand existing sections in their population and housing censuses to address climate change, or to explore how to make a separate section in those. We also encourage countries to include a module on environment and climate in existing surveys, or to design a specialized survey like Nepal and Bangladesh did. And also we encourage strongly countries to share this information with us so that we can promote it throughout the world and help other countries. Thank you so much. I'll stop here and I hope I didn't take too long.
Thank you, Emil, for this very important and practical presentation. And I think one of the very important messages is that statisticians and policymakers should work together if they want to get a useful and helpful product in the end of this process. Because as we can see, to get good statistics on climate change, you really need statistical knowledge. So thank you so much. And by the way, Emil, just a practical question. How long can you stay with us?
I need to leave 5 minutes before before 4 GMT time.
Thank you. Noted. Yes, and with this message, in addition to the presentation from Emil, and he already mentioned, I would like to invite Hashim Jovele from the National Bureau of Statistics of the United Republic of Tanzania, who, from behalf of Ruth Davison Minja, Director of the Population Census and Social Statistics of the National Bureau of Statistics of Tanzania, who will share Tanzanians' experience on compilation of climate change statistics. Hashim, I hope you're with us now.
Yes, I am still online, and I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you very well. My question
Perfect.
is, do you want to share your presentation yourself, or you would like we share your presentation?
Okay, let me try to share it from my end, and if it doesn't work, then you can share it.
Of course, let's try.
So, can you see my presentation?
I think we need a bit more. Yes, now we can see your presentation. Can you use presentation mode, please?
Yeah, let me do it.
Just a second.
Yeah, how is there?
To be honest, yes, now is everything works very good. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so firstly, thank you very much for having us, the National Bureau of Statistics, to present in this global webinar. As you introduced myself, I'm Hashim Joele from the National Bureau of Statistics of Tanzania, and I'm going to share with you a presentation on countries' experience on a compilation of climate change statistics. So my presentation will focus on 7 points, as you can see on the screen. I will start with the climate change generally in Tanzania, the policies and legal frameworks regarding or relevant to climate change in Tanzania, the experience on the global set of climate change statistics, and the overall experience of compilation of climate change statistics in Tanzania, the challenges, recommendations, and the conclusion. So, as an overview of climate change statistics in Tanzania, first I would like to say that the issues of reporting of environment statistics and particularly climate change is under the Vice President office, and that is the second most important office in the government machinery in Tanzania, just behind the president. So you can see that issues to do with the climate change are very important. They have been placed at that very high level office so that they are well coordinated and there is a real national interest in that. So in terms of policies and legal frameworks regarding climate change in Tanzania, firstly, we have a number of them, but I'll just mention a few. For instance, we have the Statistics Act, which of course gives the mandate to the National Bureau of Statistics of Tanzania to coordinate the production of statistics, which also include climate change and environment statistics. And we also have a very important policy framework or development framework, I can call it, that is Development Vision 2025. And this is about expanding the economy to middle income by 2015. And we really understand that there is quite an interlinkage between environment, climate change, and the development. So all these frameworks make it so relevant to produce climate change statistics in Tanzania. But we also have a number of multilateral environmental agreements that the country has signed. We also have a national environment policy, and we also have the National Climate Change Strategy of 2012, which this one gives or helps to the sector to integrate climate change issues in the sectoral policies and the plans. So in terms of the efforts now that the country has made to promote the production of climate change statistics and the environment statistics in general, we have a very specialized department under the National Bureau of Statistics, which deals with production of environment statistics and climate change statistics. But we also have a national technical working group on environment statistics and climate change statistics. We have also integrated issues of climate change statistics in the 5-year national strategy for development of statistics. And recently, we have adopted the use of FDS in production of environmental statistics. And we have domesticated SDGs indicators in Tanzania as a way to promote, production of climate change statistics. And for the very first time, we have included climate change questions into the recently concluded population and housing census. So in terms of the questions that we included in the census questionnaire, there are quite a number of them, but of most important will be those pertaining or relating to climate change. For instance, we asked households on the sources of drinking water, sources of energy used by household for cooking, sources of energy used for lighting, and the type of toilet facilities, the collection of household waste from the household, and whether household do sort waste that they produce in terms of plastic or glass or metal or electronic waste. And we also asked about the methods used by household to dispose of e-waste. And the census had two questions, basically. The first was household questionnaire, and there was also a community questionnaire. And there were also a number of environment or climate change questions in the community questionnaire. For instance, we asked the household about, we asked the communities in terms of sources of drinking water used by service facilities like education or health facilities or some special centers, and the types of toilet facilities. We also asked about methods used by, say, health facilities to dispose of waste, and whether the communities share any border with environmental things like rivers or lakes or grazing land, etc., etc. But we also asked the community if they have a knowledge on climate change. And just in relation to that, we also asked communities if they perceive any difference in the climate compared to the past 10 years. And also if there was any environmental things like drought or flood or cyclone ever happened in those communities. So let me now talk about the whole environment of production of environment and the climate change statistics in Tanzania. As I said, that there is a framework or legal framework that gives a mandate to the National Bureau of Statistics to produce environment statistics and statistics in general. So at the very apex of production of environment statistics and climate change statistics, there is a National Bureau of Statistics. And within the Bureau, there is a specialized department, as I said, it's called Environment Statistics Department, where you have two sections in that department, the Climate Change Statistics section and other environment statistics according to the FDS. And the department is supported by 26 regional offices. And just below that, we have the National Technical Working Group for Environmental Statistics and Climate Change Statistics. So now allow me to say a bit about the country's experience on the global set of climate change statistics and indicators. We were involved in the pilot in 2021, and I can share you our experience through 3 different stages. The first stage was to review all the tools and the mapping the national data sources with the National Technical Working Group members. And the second stage, which took place from 12th to 18th June 2021, was sharing the tools with the National Technical Working Group and also convening a meeting to discuss and respond to global set tools. And the third step was distributing the tools to fill the gaps follow-up, provision of assistance, and the analyze and submission to the UNSD. So in terms of the experience on the global set, we had a total of 134 indicators and statistics, of which 91 were very relevant to the country, which is like 60 to 80%. And in terms of data availability, we had 18 indicators, which data were readily available, and which is about 19%. And 73 indicators data were not so readily available. And in terms of methodological soundness, we had 20 indicators with a very solid methodologies, and about 71 indicators with not so solid methodologies. Okay, now let me talk about, I'm still continuing on global, the experience on the global set of climate change, global set of climate change statistics and indicators. First, I would like to point out that Tanzania is a member and a chair of the EGS, that is Expert Group on Environment Statistics. So we are championing the knowledge that we got from preparation of climate change statistics at a country level. And we're also advocating other countries to use climate change statistics and indicators adopted by 53rd session of the Statcom in 2012, and use the global set implementation guide developed by UNSD to support preparation of country-specific data, mapping of global indicators with the national policies and the priorities, and ensure consistency and relevance of national data with frameworks like FDES and the UNFSCC and IPCC. So let me talk of the major achievements that we have made so far. First, in 2017, we managed to produce the first ever National Environment Statistics Report. This is the very first time that we managed to do it. And we also produced the very first National Climate Change Statistics, and that was 2019. And Tanzania, as a current chair of the UNSD Expert Group on Environment Statistics, we are also very much involved in the in the development of the global set of climate change statistics and indicators. So we are very much in contact with the Vice President Office, which, as I said earlier, this is very important in the reporting of environment statistics and the climate change statistics in Tanzania to the international level. And we worked with them to coordinate availability of data for publication or production of a report on GHGs inventory. And the report that we produced in 2017 was very useful in the development of a national GHG report according to IPCC framework recommendations in the FDES 2013. So in terms of other data sources, we also have data. We use data from administrative records, and we are working towards enhancing availability of climate change data through specialized surveys. And we will continue to embed or include questions on climate change in population and housing census and other surveys. So this is just a summary of what I have talked before. So I'll skip this slide, and now let me go directly to key challenges with regard to production of climate change statistics in Tanzania. So firstly, we have limited accessibility of climate change data, and we have data gaps here and there. There is always a problem of frequency and the collection coverage and the coverage of data, and there is an absence of independent climate change policy, which we think would be very important to streamline all issues of climate change in a more effective manner. There is also limitation in terms of capacity to produce climate change statistics, and there's now a general lack of awareness about ongoing climate-related processes, and there's always a problem of finances. So in terms of key recommendations that we would like to share with our colleagues in other countries, so we would say countries to consider using the global set of climate change statistics and indicators, and they can also make use of the recently published UNSD implementation guidelines for the global set and the climate change statistics and indicators, that is CSAT. And the countries can seek support for capacity development through funding mechanisms such as the Green Climate Fund, Global Environment Facility, and the bilateral donors. And we think that there is also a need for strong partnership between national statistical offices and other stakeholders within the national statistical systems. This is always very important to get production of climate change statistics going or flowing more efficiently. And they can think of establishing a memorandum of understanding between various agencies and the national statistical offices. This one will very much help the sharing of information and the data, and later reporting to authorities like UNFCCC. And if it is possible, countries can consider establishing a separate climate change policy. Of course, this is important for streamlining the issues to do with the climate change. Okay, I will proceed with the recommendations. I think it is important for countries to strengthen synergies with UNSD and UNFCCC, and they can also leverage on existing statistical infrastructure, for enhancing reporting of climate change statistics. And also they can consider formation of a national technical working group for environment statistics or for climate change statistics. This is always important to get the data production going. Now, in terms of, just to conclude, issues to do with climate change, as I said earlier, they're very important for development and the reporting of the climate. And as a country, we really appreciate the work of the AGES, that is expert group on environmental statistics. And that puts an end to my presentation. I hope I haven't spent quite a lot of your time, and thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you, Hashim, a lot for your comprehensive presentation. You know, I had several questions, but with your slides, you answer all of them. And just because of lack of time, I propose to skip our questions and answer sessions for now and move on to the last presentation of this session. And after that, we can have a small, short, open discussion. Please, colleagues. And just let's move on to the next presentation. At the global arena, there is also a very successful regional experience on the work on climate change related indicators. To speak on this, I invite Gosha Chvek, statistician from the Environment and Multi-Domain Statistics Section, Statistical Division of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. And I will ask Hashim stop sharing his slides and allow Gosha to share her slides. But at the same time, I ask you, Hashim, to stay with us by the end of this session, because you might receive questions. Please.
Thank you so much, Katia, for this very nice introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to speak during the webinar. I will share my slides, but I think Hashim is still sharing. So while we sort that out, I can already mention that, yes, I'm a statistician at UNECE, that's United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, and I'll speak today mostly about about the work in our region on development of climate change related statistics so far. And but I will focus in particular about on our set of climate change related indicators, and also the guidance on the role of statistical offices in achieving national climate objectives, which is something that we are currently working on. So just to start with a very brief background, as many of you may know, UNECE is one of the 5 UN regional commissions. It covers 56 member states in Europe, North America, and Asia, and it's part of the UN Secretariat. And all our work on statistics is carried out under our main intergovernmental body in statistics. That's the Conference of European Statisticians. And in that conference, in addition to all the UNECE member states, there are also other countries that are members, such as all the OECD member countries that are outside of our region, as well as a few other UN member countries, because any country that is interested and participates in the work can become a member of the Conference of European Statisticians, even though the name may suggest otherwise. So we're very proud to be working with about more than 60 countries, about 70 countries, and also all the international organizations active in our regions are observer of the conference and participate in the work. In that framework, we've been working on climate change related statistics for a little over than 10 years now. And on that journey, we've had many milestones. But the most important ones to mention here are the first international recommendations on climate change related statistics that were developed in 2014 and endorsed by all the member, by all the member countries. And then in 2020, the CES set of indicators, and until today, where we work with the new task force on the role of national statistical offices. And I'm saying a task force because all the work that we do is always done through teams of specialists. So these are groups of experts delegated from the countries that contribute to the work, and they drive the development of all the resources here. And we are just the secretariat for these groups. And we help them with the process and also support them in whatever way is needed. And in the same way, all the work on climate change related statistics is actually overseen by another group, and that's a CS steering group on climate change related statistics that is guiding all our work and also organizes annual UNECE expert fora for producers and users of climate change related statistics. So I need to mention this CS recommendations from 2014. So it would seem a very long time ago, but it's really a foundational document for all our work. And I think not only in our region, because as I've mentioned, these were the first internationally agreed recommendations on climate change related statistics. And why they are relevant, because this document reflects this broad consensus endorsed by more than 60 countries, and on the top of that, international organizations, that actually climate change related statistics, these are all the economic, environmental, and social statistics that are relevant for climate change policy and analysis. And that is very important, that we are not talking only about the data on emissions, or we're not talking about data on the temperature increase. All the statistical data that are relevant for climate change analysis and purposes are actually part of climate change related statistics. And also in these recommendations, there was an agreement that there is a number of things that actually need to be done to improve the usefulness of official statistics in that broad understanding for climate change policy and analysis. And that covered both improving the data that are input for the greenhouse gas inventories and the role of NSOs in that process, as well as improvement in other type of data, and also development of the statistical infrastructure to make all statistics more useful for that purpose. So that document, for which there is a link somewhere here, it covers 3 groups of recommendations. I'm not gonna go into these details at all, but it's just for your future reference, because these recommendations are actually still valid, because as we know, there is still a lot to do in this area. So many of these recommendations remain just as valid today, and they underline the need to approach the development of climate change related statistics in this multidimensional, holistic way. But when these CS recommendations were being endorsed, one of the key points made by the Conference of European Statisticians was that there is a need for the next step, and that is actually to compile a list of internationally agreed list of core climate change related statistics and indicators. Because the conference has recognized that this is an issue of the importance that's growing very, very fast. And very soon, most countries will need to produce this kind of statistics. And the issues that we're talking about are, of course, of international importance. So we really need that the countries who will start working on this topic, they can produce data that are internationally comparable, that are harmonized as far as possible, and that as soon as possible, we have in the world even a small set of comparable internationally available indicators. So with this conclusion, we've been asked to work by the conference on the core set of climate change related statistics and indicators. So a group was formed under the leadership of Italy in 2014 to develop that list. And the work has taken several years, because there was the first set, which was pilot tested, then there was further development. But finally, in 2020, we've arrived at this final set of 44 core indicators, for which the main purpose was to have a set of indicators that help to describe the main picture of climate change in a country that is stable, so it doesn't require frequent changes, and that as far as possible, it uses the existing systems and it refers to existing frameworks. And we are also asked to use the system of environmental economic accounting as far as possible. So that's why in this final set, we are covering the drivers, emissions, mitigation, adaptation, and impact. So these are 5 areas that together form the big picture that we need. And in that 44 indicators, we have 27 that are based on SIA, 8 SDG indicators, and 4 Sendai framework indicators. For each of the core indicators, there is a metadata sheet that describes the methodology, the policy relevance. It gives all the methodological references. And also, there are proposed some contextual indicators as well as possible disaggregations. So the indicator set is also accompanied by implementation guidelines, and I'll speak of them a little bit in a second. So if you can have access to those slides after the meeting, there are links to all of these resources in the slides. As I've mentioned, we have in the set core indicators. This is the basic set that is recommended for all countries to develop, to produce. And then we have the list of core statistics. So that's the list of statistics that are needed to compile the indicators, plus the statistics that are needed for greenhouse gas inventories. And then we have some contextual indicators which can provide additional information that help to describe the national context, and that may be relevant only in some national contexts, but not in all of them. And they also help to tell the story that is described by the core indicators. And we also have so-called operational indicators, which are actually sectorial, spatial, or temporal breakdown of the core indicators. Because in the core set, all the indicators are totals. They are not disaggregated just from the this was the assumption at the beginning that was adopted by the task force. And how the indicators were selected, maybe what's most important to say here is that the selection criteria included the relevance in the region, methodological soundness, and data availability, as well as in line with the mandate of the task force, the priority was given to the SIA-based indicators. But the set itself, it includes both SIA and non-SIA indicators, because of course there are some very, very relevant indicators in the area of climate change related statistics that are produced using the territorial approach, that are very highly policy relevant and produced for years. So those indicators are included based on the territorial approach, such as the total greenhouse gas emissions, or some indicators related to energy. But we also have sometimes so-called dual indicators. So whenever it is possible to actually produce an indicator based on SIA, there is the residential approach, but there is also a territorial approach, and the metadata of the indicators help to explain the differences both in the interpretation of the indicator and of what is the methodology for the bridging between the two. So these are some examples, but I will not go into details of this now. And in the indicator set, we have also a tier approach, which is very similar to the global set. And speaking of global set, the 33 out of 44 indicators from our set are actually included in the global set, either exactly as they are in a very similar way. So there is quite a lot of alignment between these two sets. Because of the regional specificity, there are also some differences, and because of the process of development and adoption, but they are complementary, and the resources that accompany both sets should be helpful for anyone who wants to advance the development of climate change related statistics in the country. So in the next few slides, I have just a list of indicators per each area, but this is for future reference. And we are not going to go into that. In all of the areas, there are indicators of all the tiers. And as you can see, there are still quite a lot of tier 3 indicators, just as in the global set as well, because we know that there is a need for a lot of methodological development on many, many fronts. And as I've mentioned, the set is accompanied by implementation guidelines, which is a very practical document that describes the implementation process based on the experience of Kyrgyzstan, Luxembourg, Russian Federation, and Switzerland. And it's really step-by-step, giving practical examples of also some documents that were used by those countries on the way, such as the timeline or action plans. And websites used for dissemination and so on. So it's short and very practical, very useful. And now just very quickly, I would like to mention the new work that we've been involved in for the last year. So we have a new task force that is working on the guidance on the role of NSOs in achieving national climate objectives. And the main rationale for this work is actually something that Katja has mentioned after Emil's presentation. So that's the need for collaboration between the statisticians and the policy users of the data, because we can still see that there is a big gap, and it's quite hard for the NSOs to communicate well how all the statistics that they are producing can be used for climate change, for the purposes of climate change policies, because it's also so broad. And at the same time, for the users, it's difficult to understand what are the differences between all of these statistics and how they can be used. So we are trying to bridge that gap, and we're trying to develop a guidance document that will showcase how NSOs can contribute to achieving national climate objectives, identifying concrete ways in which NSOs can be involved, and also showcase what the statistical system is already offering to support climate action. And that also includes of course, examples of the indicators from the sets that were produced, but also some other activities and some other types of involvement broader than just producing the statistics and indicators. So the task force is currently working. It has been established a year ago, and I've seen that even in the meeting today, we have some members of the task force, colleagues from Costa Rica, so I'm very happy to see them online. And we will finish the work in a year. And that guidance will not develop new indicators or reinvent the wheel, but it's really about showcasing what is already being done and mapping it on policy needs, and also giving the statistical offices more information to navigate those policy processes, even in the national context, to know what are the stakeholders, what are the main policy questions in each area, such as mitigation or adaptation or just transition, and so on and so forth. And so the scope covers the role of NSOs in the reporting under Paris Agreement, informing national policymaking in the areas I've mentioned, as well as informing the public, which actually comes back to the basic role of national statistical offices, which is to inform the public and provide that statistics for public good. So NSOs have very clearly a role in all of these areas, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to map it all out using practical examples, recommendations on how to improve and best practices in all of these areas. So the first full draft of this document will be presented at our expert forum on climate change related statistics in the end of August this year, 28 to 30 August. So please save the date. And if you're interested to see the outcome, it will be shared with meeting participants 3 weeks before the meeting. With that, I thank you very much, and I leave the list of resources from all the work that we've done over the years by all those groups with with contributions from many countries, and I hope it's useful for you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Gosha, a lot for your presentation, for this very rich experience, full of practical examples, and I believe that participants, will go through your presentation and find a lot of helpful information that definitely, can be used together with the information that was presented by Emil, and just as a good synergy between these two very important work. And colleagues, time is fast. We have just 5 minutes, but I believe that we can answer for several questions. So I invite you, raise your hands or post your comments in the chat and share your reflections about today's discussion. I don't see any hands for now, and I have a question that I want to ask 3 speakers. Oh, by the way, I see a hand from Ivan. Ivan, let's try to be brief, and please go ahead with your question.
No, please continue. Ask your question, please. Don't worry. Thank you. I would like to speak in Spanish. I'm so sorry. Okay. Gracias. Bueno, muchas gracias por la presentación. Estoy muy feliz de haber participado hoy. Les agradezco muchísimo. Esto es un tema fundamental. Yo he vivido por 18 años la larga noche del carbono y he vivido las estadísticas exhaustivas de la mitigación. Y siempre he escuchado que adaptación no se puede medir, que adaptación es difícil de cuantificar. Nosotros desde Costa Rica creemos que la adaptación es el rostro humano del cambio climático. Se puede tocar, se puede ver, se puede olfatear, se puede llorar. ¿Cómo lo lloramos? A través de las pérdidas y los daños. Por eso agradezco mucho el trabajo que están haciendo, porque cuando leo las estadísticas que ustedes nos muestran, veo el rostro humano del cambio climático. No siempre el problema está en el cielo, las soluciones están aquí en la tierra. Y lo que veo son respuestas, soluciones en todas estas métricas. La adaptación es medible, es verificable y es reportable. Y ustedes lo han demostrado hoy. Muchas gracias.
Thank you a lot, Ivan, for your comments. I think, yes, all speakers, for each speaker, it was a honey, you know, just to hear these very nice words. And I want to ask one question, each of you, Emil, Gosha, and Hashim, just 1 minute per answer. What would you recommend to countries that have just started implementing climate change indicators? Please. I think we can start from Emil, please.
Thank you so much, because I really need to leave in less than 1 minute. I mean, as I emphasized, the first step to recommend to the countries is to initiate a consultation. If the NSO is the one to take the initiative, if the NSO has the mandate to start working on climate change statistics, they need to consult what to do and how far to go with the authorities working on climate change reporting in the country. Sometimes it's the initiative starts from the climate change authorities. So the same way we would emphasize that they need to consult with statistics. It's not always easy to understand if they're talking the same or not, what are the duplications, what are the issues, but I hope with all this work on the guidelines, also that ECE is doing, Gosha just presented, we can help in that. And with this, I need to leave. If there are more questions, perhaps I can suggest that we address some of them tomorrow. I'll join again tomorrow.
Thank you so much, and have a nice day. Thank you.
You too.
Emil,
Bye-bye.
and bye-bye. Gosha, please go ahead.
Thank you for that question, Katya. And I would, of course, support suggestions from Emil and emphasize again this need to work with the users to create a stakeholder platform to coordinate and really focus on what is most needed from the policy perspective, because this is how the strength of this statistical program can be built, through being as useful and as relevant as possible. And we know that there is a lot that could potentially be produced, and it can be overwhelming, and no country will be able to produce all of this data from day one and maybe even on day 100. But it's very important to start. It is very important to start by working closely with the users and to strengthen the role that NSOs can play in these areas and coordinate both with the stakeholders outside of the office, but also inside the office, because we know that a lot of work in statistical domains can contribute and is relevant for climate change related policy and analysis, but so often the understanding is just very superficial, and it focuses on these key indicators, which are maybe not where the strength of the statistical offices is. But there is so much that statistical offices can produce. So it's very important to focus on that strength and combine it with the user needs and really be brave and bold and go for it.
Thank you, Gosha, a lot for your recommendations. And now I want to move to Hashim. And by the way, maybe he already recommended something in his very good presentation, but Hashim, maybe just a few words from your end, if you are with us.
Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, I put forward a number of recommendations from the presentation, but I can just single out one very important recommendations for countries that are starting to produce climate change statistics. And that is to organize production of climate change statistics within their countries. And that one can be done by establishing a national technical working group, where you have a number of organizations which in one way or another are acting on the climate change. So if we organize production of climate change statistics in that format, I think it is very easy to collect the statistics and later on reporting to global bodies like UNSD and etc. etc. I think that is one of the very important recommendations that we can give out. Thank you.
Yes, thank you a lot, Hashim. And with these comments, we came to the end of our first day of this webinar. The first day of the webinar for Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean has come to an end. We would like to thank all the participants for making this day happen. Everyone who attends online, interchat with us, listen, provide comments, everyone who is here with us. We believe that information has helped to improve your knowledge on statistical frameworks and guidelines on climate change statistics. Tomorrow, we will speak about statistical frameworks and guidelines on disaster-related statistics. We wish you a good rest of the day, wherever you are right now, and see you tomorrow. Thank you a lot. Bye.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you so much.